This is problem number 3 from the Chapter 1 closure problems. Graph and fully describe the function y equals 2 times the square root of x minus 1 plus 3. So for this one I've come up with a table of certain values that we can plug in for x. So let's start with 0. Plugging in x for 0, we're going to have 0 minus 1. Well, what is 0 minus 1? Negative 1. Can we do the square root of negative 1? No. So that one we don't have a value for. So the next thing we're going to do is plug in 1. So we're going to have 2 times the square root of 1 minus 1 plus 3, which is 2 times the square root of 0 plus 3. The square root of 0 is just 0, and 2 times 0 gives us 0 again, plus 3 is going to give us 3. The next one, 2 times the square root of 3 minus 1 plus 3. And we have 2 times the square root of 2 plus 3. And if you plug that into your calculator, you will end up getting 5.83. Make sure when you're plugging in your calculator you only have the 2 under the square root and the plus 3 outside of it. Otherwise this will mess up your value. I plugged the rest into my calculator and I got when x equals 5, y equals 7, when x equals 7, y equals 7.9, and when x equals 9, y equals 8.66. So we can go ahead and graph these. So 0 we don't have a value. When we have 1, we go up to 3. Oops. When we have 3, 5.83. So this one just estimates since it's a decimal. Next we have x is 5, y is 7, x is 7, y is 7.9. And last, when x is 9, y is 8.66. So we have a graph here. This is going to be our starting point here, since 0 didn't work for us. So go ahead and we're going to have a curve here. And since we can plug anything else in for x, we're going to put an arrow at the end of our graph. Don't forget that to show that it keeps going. And next we're going to fully describe this. So this is using the questions from our learning log that we wrote down. So one of the first questions is, what does it look like? Well, I would say this is a curve. And also, is it pointing up or down? Well, it's pointing up. So we can say the graph is a curve pointing up. Next, what happens as x increases? So as we go this way, what's happening to our y values in our graph? So as we're going up in our x's, our y's are also going up. So we will say as x increases, y increases, because our y's are also going up. Are there any x-intercepts or y-intercepts? So in other words, does it cross along our y-axis? Nope, we don't have anywhere where it crosses. Does it cross anywhere along our x-axis? No. So no x or y-intercepts. What about, are there any special points? So a special point could be a vertex, or if there's a starting point, and in this case we have a starting point. So our starting point is going to be right here. So starting point at, and that point is going to be 1, 3. So 1, 3. Next is there any limitations on x or any limitations on y, any limitations on the input or output? So since we've learned domain and range, we can relate this to domain and range. So any limitations on our input, this is dealing with domain, with our x's. So are there any numbers we can't plug in for x? Well, we found out we couldn't plug in 0, and we can also see if we plug in any negatives, we're not going to be able to take the square root of a negative. So none of our negatives are going to work either. So in this case, I'm going to write it as the domain. So our domain, the lowest that we can plug in is 1. We could say less than or equal to x. Or you can say x is greater than or equal to 1, saying all of the numbers that we can plug in have to be 1 or bigger. Oops, there you can see that. The next thing is the range. So is there any limitations on our output? Well, can we get anything down here? We didn't get any values down here, so we can't get anything lower than 3. So we're going to say 3 is less than or equal to y, or like I switched it on the domain, y is greater than or equal to 3. So all of our outputs are going to be greater than or equal to 3. The last thing is there any symmetry? Okay, is there anywhere on this graph that you can split it in half and it will be a mirror image on the other side? Well, not that we can see so far, so we can say there is no symmetry. And you have answered all the questions that are in your learning log. So that is all for fully describing the graph.